Hi, how are you doing?
Hello, Marco. Hello, everyone.
Hello,
You
everybody.
yeah, you already met Marco in the last few sessions. If not, I'm incredibly grateful and honored to be here with Marco, a scientist from VTT Finland and Waste to Wear, and a poet.
Yeah, we've been really interesting and inspiring. We figured out that we both have a mutual interest, and so we on Instagram we've been cross posting our poetry, which is interesting. So I really appreciate that because it somehow taps into the thing you were doing. So you're a designer, and I find it very exciting. For me, for us as a scientist, we are very far removed from what you do in daily life. But then it's really good to hear what kind of problems that you have, or what kind of like things you're working on, and how do you so that we can fix things, because that's what we like to do. We like to fix things. We are currently in an era where basically we are we can almost make anything we want. So, but in order for something to be made, it would be good to be meaningful. We have to do meaningful things, because I mean, as a we have big global problems, and we're working on those kind of things, and it's really important that we are fixing these things together. So, if I want to make something, I can make something, and then I give it to you, and then you go like, "Ah, this is absolute rubbish. I can't use this." It would be really helpful if we can make materials that are useful and meaningful, and for that I'm really grateful that we have these opportunities and discussions, because normally we are very far removed from discussing things with designers. So I'm really happy about this, and we're learning a lot, and that's really cool. um, so, and you're now for so you have we looked in your concepts a bit, and you were like talking about space, and that was really great because I wrote a poem about space. You wrote a poem. You're writing poetry about space now, and before that you wrote about time. So if you think about this time and space, then you get the feeling of gravity and impact. Why did you choose these kind of like concepts, and how does that work together in your design process?
Well, time and space began as an art installation after I wanted to express the impact of impermanence, basically, on my own life.
Hmm.
And this is something that affects everybody on a daily basis. Now we try to think it out of our heads, or like who we are and why does everybody die, basically.
Hmm.
So after, I mean, of course, after thinking about it my whole life, always wondering, and after experiencing that at such a close proximity in the last few years, I
Hmm.
had to just bravely go and just deeply explore it, how this concept of time and space impacts my life. Because at a certain time, we are in somebody's association, and then at some point, that is not there anymore. And then that space becomes, is it really so impenetrable, that space between
Hmm.
life and death? And how we can navigate that is just an exploration that I try to imbibe in this
Okay. Yeah.
body of work. And it's, of course, it's a huge subject, but this is just a little insight why I did it, simply to be brave and explore it more. Because
Hmm.
there's a impetus, like an art project, or some project that creates a certain um, shell around it, a certain way to make it inspiring,
Hmm.
to make that step, to be brave, to explore it in the mind without too much pain and too much fear, or maybe with too much pain and too much fear. See
Hmm.
how it connects. Then perhaps there is the tendency to just go on with life. And
Yeah.
I, yeah, I wanted to reach to the try to reach to the edge of the subject in order to see the beauty in it.
Yeah. So it's also very fitting if you think about the research we're doing at VTT. It's a very good link because there's this lifetime of clothing. It's a little bit less dramatic than the lifetime of a human, obviously, yeah, from an emotional point of view. But then, yeah, I think last time also we had one time we had a short discussion and we talked about connectivity and about clothing as an emotion, or that clothing could actually sort of communicate with each other, and like plants actually are communicating with each other with smells. So this kind of like it's an interesting kind of thing. But I wanted to ask your opinion about this. About I mean, we can do two things. So right, we can make now. Let's say that we can make a T-shirt that we don't wash it. We just wear it once or three. Oh, you don't have to wash it, and then afterwards you just shred it into, and then you shred it, and then we treat it with some enzymes, and then we get some sugar, and then we feed sugar to microbes, and microbes they make some kind of like a new material out of it. For example, a new T-shirt, and so we have this very closed, fast loop, something that you can do in your basement. Or what we now see is that the economical trend is towards more wearing the clothes longer. Having clothes that has a long lifetime, like in the Middle Ages, we had one pot. You take care of your pot, you fixed your pot, you had one pot, it's your pot, nobody else can use your pot, and so on. And of course, that would be kind of strange from my point of view. For if you look at the fashion industry, because there was like first there was like every 2 years there's two times a year a new line comes out, and 4 times a year. Now maybe there's 20 cycles a year. I don't know. You really have to correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems like there's like if somebody would have like really happy with their pants and they can wear the pants for 20 years, very obvious that you are stuck in that era, and people don't like to be seen as not fashionable in certain times. So where are we going towards? Are we going towards clothing that lasts forever, or are we going towards clothes that is only worn once and we don't even have to wash it? How can we and how can we pass on clothing? We also talked last time about allow borrowing and lending clothing, or not owning clothing in 100% kind of way. Where do you see where it will go? Will it go to like, okay, let's reuse the molecules very fast and have very quick life cycles of a few days, or do we have long life, like one lifetime of a human kind of clothing, and you wear your pants forever? What do you feel about it? Where do you think it's going?
Personally, I think that it's going in both directions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm the kind of person that likes a lifetime thing.
Yeah.
For example, I still have clothes from my great grandmother.
All right, that's very cool.
Had made, because the materials were so amazing and the sewing was so good that it was exactly like new, practically. Like nobody, like nobody even wore it. I presented one of those pieces in my time collection as part of the book. It's practically, there's real silver in the thread of the clothing, and it's just, the zipper is unbreakable. So yeah, great grandmother. That's like 3 lifetimes.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Basically, yeah. One dress lasted already. But I also like the concept of non-intrusive temporal clothing.
Yeah.
Especially for perhaps something like underwear or T-shirts or something like that. I think both should exist simultaneously. So to satisfy the need to own something, and to satisfy the need to have newness and cleanliness of certain items, I think both should exist together.
Okay, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, because it's hard for me to know, okay, which direction should we go in, and then it's good to hear that that we should do both. Why not? I think that from the recycling point of view, this if you have a mixed materials kind of thing, and also if it's like, if it has zippers or buttons, or if it's sewn, or if there's even if the materials, many different materials are inside, not only cellulosic, so I mean plant-based materials, or then plastics. If it's a mixed kind of material, it's very hard to recycle back to the molecules, and then really work on it so that you can use it directly back. So that's very difficult to design for that. How do you have that in mind? Because I know a lot of people are sustainable designers and are really working on these kind of concepts. It's really fitting in Helsinki Fashion Week. I know that it's awesome how they're doing it, but
Yeah.
are you also and then they're working with materials that are like would be burned or thrown away because they're even new and they're still laying around in factories and so on. And the materials are sustainable from that point of view. But are you also somehow thinking about what happens after your garments are no longer used? How to recycle them and design for recyclability is something I like to think about, so that we can not have a linear consumption, but more like a circular economy kind of consumption concept coming up in the future. How are you working on these things also?
Personally, in my collections, the clothing is mostly on the durable side, and it's designed to just be transferred from generation to generation, or as art pieces. When I was creating pieces that were a bit multipliable and limited series, they were all made with natural materials that were simply, but they were also very good quality. So I'm not sure how long it would take them to actually decompose.
Yes, but of course, I know if we what we would do if we would get garment in, we need to know what it is. So if there's no label, it's kind of tricky. I was talking with Tess about that. That maybe she wants to have a small device, not too expensive, you can put on top of the clothing, and then you know what's in it. That's kind of would be useful. Yeah, it would be kind of a useful thing to work on. That would be cool.
I do get gifts. I get gifts from people who know the work of the atelier and who have some very valuable cloth, for example, or cloth that I can turn into another piece of art. So that would be actually a very valuable contribution to just be able to place a material under something and completely, yes. Mostly I know what's in it because I burn it, or if there's any kind of plastic in it, or then I immediately then I usually tend to not use it.
Yeah. We were working on, for example, we were working on some enzymes and microbes that can degrade plastics, so we can then reuse this material. And we're also working on bio-based kind of plastics that are biodegradable in a way, or are completely biodegradable, but then get different properties. So, but yeah, this is kind of like if we know what it is, then we can treat it in a certain way and then treat it in another way, and so on. I still think there's a big problem with colors. I think there's a big problem still with some of the coatings. Well, I'm trying to also get some funding to work on those things. VTT in general is working on bio-based coatings, so that's not my work. But yeah, these things are complex. They're very complex problems in that sense.
Now there is something that just came to my mind when we were talking about biodegradable plastics. I'm quite keen on really beautiful embroidery. And a lot of the embroidery is produced using these plastic sequins.
Yeah.
So I kind of decided not to use my own embroidery, but to reuse what already exists and create art around it. Reuse embroidery that I receive as gifts from people. That not anyway, scrap that, but mostly second-hand vintage antique embroidery. And is there in development something in your studio perhaps that could create beautiful elements for embroidery that are biodegradable, eco-friendly somehow?
So you're talking about beads?
Beads, sequins, the little elements.
Yeah. Yeah, there are things that are very simple to do actually, and I think that we could go in that direction. I really like this idea. Like for a few hundred years back, we didn't have plastic, right? And people make buttons out of milk. So I think we should not get more cows on the planet to get more milk for that and make materials. But we can already make milk proteins emit microbes at the same price point as we can do as a cow makes milk, and so those milk proteins you can very easily make plastic out of it. You can do it in your kitchen. You just need a little bit of acid, a little bit of vinegar, a little bit of milk, and then you put some coloring in it, and you can actually make your own plastic out of it. So you can make your own beads from milk. So it's not so complicated to do, and I think we will see more of those kind of things happening. Apparently, it looks really nice. These old buttons from 150 years ago when there was no plastic, or 100 years ago, and that's one thing we could easily could be done. Then of course we are working on different kind of plastics that are biodegradable, that are produced by microbes. So for example, PHA, PHB composite materials. So if you throw them in the ocean, they are biodegradable, and but they are very soft. I mean, they're not as hard. They don't have this high melting point as polyethylene does, for example, PE does. So we have to work on making these materials a little bit more durable, maybe, or maybe they don't need to be so durable. So it's also a good question, right? So that's again between this longevity of your clothing and short-term clothing, and same with the threads. I guess it doesn't always have to be plastic. It can also be a little bit different kind of materials that could work. As long as you know what it is, and we can work on it. But the colors are complicated. I think that there's a lot of color in nature. We have worked also on that, and we're working on a bit on it. But yeah, that's still a complex problem to get nice colors and shiny stuff and glitter. And glitter is also.
Silver and gold, and could you use real silver and gold or some molecules extracted from silver and gold and then just
no, we don't. No, we're not using that. No, I think it's difficult if you have silver. It's quite toxic. So and yeah, I think it could be quite problematic for nature anyway to put lots of silver in nature. Gold is what more inert, but very expensive. So I don't know.
Yeah, I meant like something more like okay, I'm not really a scientist, but something comes to mind, like some molecule of silver and gold that produces the shine, but it doesn't really affect the environment.
Well, what you can work on, what was really cool, that certain proteins, they are folded in some kind of like patterns. For example, there's this reflectin, and it's like, for example, you have it in beetles. So beetles have really beautiful colors in their shells, and it's a mixture of sugar, like chitin sugars, and proteins, and they are certain, they reflect the light in a certain way. I like that approach. Maybe that's a good approach. I know people working on it. There are companies also working on that, and also there are scientists working on that kind of thing as a color. So that could be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting. How about before maybe we go on? You're kind of mentioning different animal species in the. Of course, in your lab, there's no experimentation on animals or any kind of violence.
No, we don't work. We don't have any, and we don't do any animal testing in our labs. No, we don't have that. So we are producing materials, and also different kind of like proteins in our lab. And we are using fungi mainly, also sometimes some bacteria. And it's like brewing beer, right? So you just have an organism, you train the organism. Either you do that direct manipulation, or you do that over a period of time. And then the organism makes what you want to make by either growing, or if you can also tell it, okay, now start making something. Either way, it's called induction. So you can induce also certain productions, and then we make it, and then you harvest it, and so on. So that's and then you have biomass, and some of the biomass can also be useful as a waste. I know that, for example, people have been using biomass and mix it with some nanoparticles. You can make concrete out of it. And of course, we are also using fungi to make leather, mycelia leather. Yeah, so this is very interesting.
How far have you come in creating something that's perhaps the quality of leather that can be transferred to generations, like good bags, for example? Good designer bags can be really transferred from generation to generation. persons
Yeah.
and was kept for a long time.
Group Gessa is working on that, and he is really good at that. We are working on that. So at the moment we are in the quality of like a low grade leather, but we are working on improving these properties. We are also looking at what could you like produce color inside these mycelia so that or leather already has a color, or if they would have a what other companies have done, that they produce other molecules inside there that then produce.
Marco, I can't hear you anymore.
Okay, I accidentally muted myself. For example, you could. So I mean, it's really, you can do a lot. I think with that. So you could give the fungi could produce something that to enhance or change the properties of this kind of mycelial leather in such a way that you have something that's not even leather but better, something completely different. So that's kind of like, we never know where we are going with that. We don't know yet.
I think I'm waiting for that better leather to produce.
It's already better. It's already better because you don't have to kill a cow. So I think it's already better.
I haven't actually created a bag yet as a couture designer because of I haven't yet found a material that's satisfactory. I don't want the violence to animals in my company.
Yeah.
There hasn't yet been, so I think I'm going to really excitedly anticipate what.
Yeah, I think we should stay in contact, and we try to get you some samples. You can maybe try something. Gets a little bit better material. You're a little bit stuck. Okay.
Connection lost.
Oh, sorry, you were stuck a little bit for a moment. Yes, but we can do that. We can try to get you some stuff, and then we can try to do something interesting. Again, then we need to hear what you want to make, what kind of thing you want to have, what you want to make. I think we're running towards the end also, a bit. So wondering, I don't have the connection to the questions. Were there any questions at all?
No, I didn't see any.
Okay,
I guess
that's fine.
everything is clear.
Everything is clear, yes. But please, if you have some more questions to ask.
Well, how about when we just met, we had a little conversation about the role of emotions in scientific discoveries. Have you noticed that there's any kind of effect of the human brain or emotions when you're trying to create something on a molecular level?
Molecular level, that's difficult to say. I think what is very important, I think, for science is that it is a very creative process. So people see it as very systematic and very like doing things very systematically, and that of course is true. You have to document what you do very systematically. It has to be very transparent. We have to be able to go back and if you do recreate my experiments, it has to be able to be redone. It has to be reproducible. But at the same time, in order for new things to happen, we have a bubble. We have a bubble of knowledge, and for example, one PhD is one little bump outside this bubble of knowledge of something new that nobody has ever seen before. And that's the awesome stuff about science, that sometimes you're looking at something that nobody has ever seen before. You're the first one, you know it. And that's very exciting. But to figure that out, you have to be very creative. And sometimes it's just luck. And these things are also happen. So it's a very creative process in a way to figure stuff out. Sometimes it's a big step that just happens by luck. And the creative step, sometimes you can get there, but then you have to go very slow steps and be a little bit more thorough. So it is always an emotional thing because you have to, it's also feel very personal if you fail an experiment, for example. That could happen. So it's in a way more personal, but like from the molecular level energy, I know what you're talking about, but I don't experience it like what you mean.
Interesting. Yeah, I've had a little bit of experience because I've studied some Eastern sciences and just experiencing the energy of a certain material through a subtle scientific process that can only be experienced by people who practice the same subtle scientific process. And they are replicable. And I can actually see how a certain item that has been infused with a certain thought can to feel and look differently after it's infused with a certain other thought. So that's just some field of maybe research that I hope maybe someday it will be looked into. I'm not particularly, too emotionally attached. It was just an experience that I have on a regular basis, and I think it's quite interesting, especially when it comes to your idea of recycling garments and what happens to them after their, maybe considering their longevity, how to, when they're more, how should I put it, in yoga we say when they're purified on this subtle level, on the level of the mind and the energy, then they can also last longer. And
so they have a more emotional connection to the clothing that would be useful in order for them not to throw them away. Yes, I understand what you mean. We have certain small. We always keep one or two small things from the kids, for example, when they were really young. You have an emotional attachment to it. It serves no purpose, but you want to keep it. I understand that.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, to just observe on that level. Let me see if there's anything here. Not yet. I did have another question for you, which is something that I'm also excited about. If you're working on any kind of silk.
Silk. Yeah, we have been producing different. Also, again, not so much. I've done it a little bit, but we have been working on producing spider silk with microbes. So microbes, we just basically we don't kill spiders, but what we do is that we know what the genome is of spiders. We know which genes make the silk. So we go online, we order the DNA, via the computer. Then it's synthetic biology, right? So and then we get the DNA in the lab, and then we stick it into a microbe, and the microbe we tell it to make spider silk, and then we make a protein, and the protein we then spin it, and then we have silk. So it's very, very well possible to do that. Companies are also working on that in Japan. For example, Spiber, the company, they're working on these kind of concepts as well. But we are working on these kind of things, and then you can change also the spider silk to make it even better than it was before, or start making hybrid molecules that are like certain parts are less stretchy than other parts are more stretchy, or stronger, and so on. So or stronger even. So yes, we are working on silk.
Very interesting. Kinds of weights of the thread and different thickness of the thread as well.
Yeah, we are working on those things. So I mean, it's a lot of these technologies. It's also really hard to know for people to say, okay, it seems like a little bit, at the beginning stages, but a lot of these technologies, they are not linear; they are exponential. So if you're at 5-6% of what the technology at this moment is capable of, it goes really fast. There's always this tipping point in an exponential curve, and then all of a sudden it goes really, really well. And so we have seen that with many different technologies. Solar energy capture, for example, we've seen it when they were figuring out the new human genome. It went really slow in the beginning, and then all of a sudden, boom! It's like it goes past the tipping point, and you have this exponential technologies. And it's hard to think in an exponential way, but when we see this protein production and fermentation technologies, and also making materials with it. So we are beginning in some of them. We are in the beginning, but it will rapidly come. I think so. Yes.
Okay, so then you're almost at the tipping point.
Let's hope so. You never know when you're at the tipping point, but all of a sudden it goes like that. We see these disruptions. It would be really nice if we can make this value chain, but also the supply chain of materials more local and short, right? Yeah. Nice. Take a t-shirt, shred it, get some glucose, feed it to a microbe, make some silk. You can do it in your own basement, in your own atelier. You don't have to buy it from, you don't know where it's coming from, or you don't know how ethical, because you just saw in the news, this whole thing in China now about the cotton again. So this is very difficult for the consumers. It's like, now we cannot buy this, and now we cannot buy this. And it's very difficult. But if you make it yourself in the basement, and you can say, okay, this is how much CO2 I used, and this is how I produced or saved, and this is how much water I recycled, and this is the material, then it's very easy to have a digital passport to your clothing. That would be really nice.
That would be very nice. I'm actually really excited about it. Honestly, this is kind of the first time I hear about it. This whole concept of creating your own cloth in that specific way that you described, and I'm really, really excited about it.
Yeah, would be interesting. I mean, there's one company in Malaysia that we talked to, and they can do 3D printing of certain test pieces. Let's say that your customer is in other side of the world, in Australia, and you can email him the properties, and he will print it there and can feel what you're talking about. That's really handy. That would be kind of useful. All right. But it was really, really interesting to talk to you, and we will continue the discussions also in the future, and we will get some. We'll try to get some letter to you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your great work. It's really, really amazing. And,
all right.
See you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.